They were now in similar straits, though the time had been longer because the languages had taken a long step towards perfection, and because the machines maintained everything for them through generation after generation. Why, the entire planet of Pluto had been deserted, yet on Pluto the largest mines of one of their metals were located. The machines still functioned. A perfect unity existed throughout the system, a unified system of perfect machines, and all those people knew was that to do a certain thing to a certain lever produced certain results, just as men in the Middle Ages knew that to take a certain material, wood, and place it in contact with other pieces of wood heated red, would cause the wood to disappear and become heat. They did not understand that wood was being oxidized with the release of the heat of formation of carbon dioxide and water. So those people did not understand the things that fed and clothed and carried them. I stayed with them there for 3 days. And then I went to Jacksville, York City, too. That was enormous. It stretched over, from well north of where Boston is today to well south of Washington. That was what they called York City. I never believed him when he said it, said Jim, interrupting himself. I knew he didn't. If he had, I think he'd have bought land somewhere along there and held for a raise in value. I know Jim. He'd have the idea that 7 million years was something like 700, and maybe his great-grandchildren would be able to sell it. Anyway, went on Jim, he said it was all because the cities had spread so. Boston spread south, Washington spread north, and York City spread all over, and the cities between grew into them. And it was all one vast machine. It was perfectly ordered and perfectly neat. They had a transportation system that took me from the north end to the south end in 3 minutes. I timed it. They had learned to neutralize acceleration. Then I took one of the great space liners to Neptune. There were still some running. Some people, you see, were coming the other way. The ship was huge. Mostly it was a freight liner. It floated up from Earth, a great metal cylinder 3/4 of a mile long and 1/4 of a mile in diameter. Outside, the atmosphere began to accelerate. I could see Earth dwindle. I have ridden one of our own liners to Mars, and it took me, in 3048, 5 days. In half an hour on this liner, Earth was just a star, with a smaller, dimmer star near it. In an hour, we passed Mars. 8 hours later, we landed on Neptune. Marine was the city, large as the York City of my day, and no one living there. The planet was cold and dark, horribly cold. The sun was a tiny pale disk, heatless and almost lightless, but the city was perfectly comfortable. The air was fresh and cool, moist, with the scent of growing blossoms, perfumed with them, and the whole giant metal framework trembled just slightly with the humming, powerful beat of the mighty machines that had made and cared for it. I learned from records I deciphered because of my knowledge of the ancient tongue that their tongue was based on, and the tongue of that day when men was dying. The city was built 3,730,150 years after my birth. Not a machine had been touched by the hand of man since that day. Yet the air was perfect for man, and the warm rose-silver glow hung in the air here and supplied the only illumination. I visited some of their other cities, where there were men, and there on the retreating outskirts of man's domain I first heard the song of longing, as I called it, and another, the song of forgotten memories. Listen. He sang another of those songs. There's one thing I know, declared Jim. That bewildered note was stronger in his voice, and by that time I guessed I pretty well understood his feelings. Because you have to remember, I heard it only second-hand, from an ordinary man, and Jim had heard it from an eye and ear witness that was not ordinary, and heard it in that organ voice. Anyway, I guess Jim was right when he said he wasn't any ordinary man. No ordinary man could think of those songs. They weren't right. When he sang that song, it was full of more of those plaintive minors.